In this week's tip, I want to talk a little bit about emergency funds. A question I get all the time from individuals is how much money should I set aside for any unforeseen emergency that might come up in the future? Now, there's different schools of thought on this, but I typically recommend that you hold at least 6 months worth of living expenses in an emergency account. Now, one of the things that you can do when you're calculating what your living expenses are, eliminate things such as money that you're maybe setting aside in your 401k plan, or maybe money that you want to set aside for family vacations or any other luxury items. If you find yourself in an emergency, you don't necessarily have to account for those types of things. So what you want to do is make sure you have at least 6 months worth of living expenses in an account that you can get your hands on quickly. Now, things that might qualify as an emergency fund will be things like obviously a checking account, savings accounts, money market accounts. You can maybe even use a CD that doesn't have any penalties for taking an early withdrawal. What you usually wouldn't want to count as an emergency fund is maybe an employer-sponsored retirement plan where there's going to be penalties if you access the money early, or anything else that has a time horizon connected to it. You need to keep this money liquid. Now, when you keep money liquid, it means that your returns are going to be pretty low, but that's okay, because what you're going to have is good access to those funds if you need it in case of an emergency, and we hope to never have an emergency, but you got to make sure that that money is there when you need it. One thing that I usually recommend to individuals, let's say that you're just starting out, or you don't have 6 months worth of living expenses in an emergency fund. Another option could potentially be to establish a home equity line of credit on your house, and that's assuming that you might have some equity. Now, I'm not recommending that you go out and get into all kinds of debt, but if you have equity in your house, you can establish one of these equity lines of credit. Depending on the bank, they might charge you $50 or $75 per year if you never use it, and you don't plan on using it. It's just there in case you have an emergency. But that can be used as a safety net until you build up that safety net, and then maybe you can eliminate or cancel the home equity line of credit. We don't want you using your house as a piggy bank, but if there's no other options, you got to get the money from somewhere. And I recommend establishing this home equity line of credit prior to the emergency coming up. I've had individuals that have told me in the past that, well, if I were to lose my job, that's okay, I've got equity in my house. Well, if you lost your job and then you go to the bank and ask them to establish this equity line of credit, they're probably going to turn you down because you don't have any income, you don't have any way of paying them back. So get it established before it's too late. And that's one way that you can solve the problem of not having enough liquid assets set aside if something were to happen. So a minimum of 6 months is what you want. 12 months is even better. And that's the tip of the week.